Hello, and welcome back to our series where we are building a people and culture management system, or HCM, depending on your terminology. This series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And I want to pick off where we left off the last video. I know didn't want y'all to sit here and watch me write this 80 times. And as you can see, what this code does is it takes this array of our employee records coming from our Google Apps script side and then populates the specific index to the value of a specific uh, ID, input ID or element ID. And as you can see, this is, fairly long. We have 80 different pieces here. And what I'd like to do now is simply run and test this before we figure out how to, if there's a way specifically to condense this or how to approach that. So let's go over to our PCM here and let's refresh it just to make sure we pick up the nearest code. We'll go to operations and records, and let's just grab an ID, maybe 8. Then we'll scroll down and retrieve. Now, at least for me, when we're building a create, read, update, delete function, this retrieve part, particularly grabbing it from a spreadsheet in the form of a Google Sheet, is quite possibly the most time consuming. And the reason is there's just so many things that we have to check. And let's run this and see, because I'm pretty sure, just how luck has it, there will be some of those items that we need to adjust. Okay, I can see one right off the bat. So this is our notes section, and this should be here, but what we have is undefined. So when we have undefined, what it's meaning is it's trying to pull a index that isn't part of that array. So this here is at index 80, which means that there isn't 80 indexes in this data set. This should be 79. So what this is telling me that we have our numbers mixed up. Particularly, you can see that this is obviously the first cell we're populating it to, or the first field we're populating it to. It starts at 1. And then it's pretty much sequential. But what it's telling me is that somewhere in here, we are missing a number, like we just skipped a number. So let's come back over here and look at the rest of our data. And we'll just start up here at top. Okay, these here are all good. So if we have a field that is a select field and it's not populating, what that typically means is that what it is receiving, the data that it's receiving, like say this was just Super 6, it doesn't work. So we'll look at that in a second. I'll show you exactly what I mean. Because they have to meet one of these right here. It has to be exact. So we'll change that and see. Let's keep going through here. Again, that data is randomly populated because we have a finance coordinator select as a job cat executive. And well, at least that makes sense. Yeah, if this was real data, we would have some work to do on our records end. Okay, so these are all good. This is populating fine. And there it is. So XYZ should be a benefits provider. So commission is, I bet, is exactly where it is that I probably messed up. And the reason why XYZ or this health provider isn't populating, we only have ABC XYZ. And what it's doing is, let's come over here to our benefits provider here. But what it's doing is, because it's misaligned, it's trying to read this, and there is no ABC or XYZ selection, so it's not populating in that field. Because we're not populating text, we're populating the value. And if you think of the value of a select field, the value of a select field is not what we are seeing. It is, let's find the select fields here and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So the value isn't necessarily what we're seeing in here in the options. It's what precedes it. So it's value 1, 2, 3. Now remember, we're populating this dynamically, but we're populating in a way that it equals what the user sees. So if the value doesn't exist, it can't set that value because it's a select form. So let's go over to our code and look at commission here. Okay, let's see. Commission is down here. Okay, so something here is being populated wonky. So let's just start here, callback, and make sure these are all sequential. Oop, and they're not. So I missed 55. So what I'm going to do is now change these. I'll pause the video and change all these to where they're aligned, and then we'll run it again with the same number, and that should take care of that. Okay, so now I've got these all situated again. So now let's go back to our form here and just scroll through and make sure that we don't have anything else that's kind of off. Yep, dental, same exact thing. The employee vision's off by 1. Okay, good. Now that should take care of it. So let's refresh this and use 8 again. And let's change the supervisor in here to something different on our row 8 to show that that's exactly the reason why that's not. So we have finance, and we're just going to put Jake in here. So as you can see, we're over here on number 8, employee 8, and I changed that supervisor to Jake, which doesn't exist in the dropdown, so it should not populate at all. So let's come over here to our form and we will refresh it. We'll go operations and records, and we will hit 8. Now the supervisor shouldn't populate at all. Okay, so that's still undefined. That's still undefined. So it looks like we moved it over 1, so it moved the undefined over 1. So what we need to do is look at where our data array ends, and that's probably coming over from our Google Apps script side. And I think I remember what we did that may have messed that one up. So let's come up here to our supervisor. Yep, there it is. That's blank. So let's scroll through and just make sure that we have everything. Okay, so everything looks perfectly aligned except for individual employee share. So the dental may be a little off. Looks like the employee dental provider, employee share. So let's go look at what that's happening here. And that's the problem when we're doing it this way. It just takes a lot of looking around to see what it is that's actually missing. So we have dental employee, 65, 66, 67. Oh, wow. Okay. So it appears that I went from 67 and just basically said the heck with 68 and 69 and moved it up to 70. So if you think about it, it's saying that these two here, the stock value and the notes, are undefined because they exist outside the element, and that's the reason why. So let's go ahead and change this here real quick. 68, 69. And when you're doing it in a line like this is so easy to do just because it's a repetitive task. Now, if I had to do it this way, I would have used my trusty for each loop and just did it that way, but or populated this at least that way. Let me make sure that I'm actually getting it. 69, 70, 71, 72. Yep, see, I did it again. 74, 75, 6, 7, 78, 79. Yep, see, you start thinking of doing something else and start talking, and all of a sudden that's what happens. So now let's save this and try it again. And we'll go back over here and change this to what it was. And now let's refresh our form and see what we got. Okay, so do operations, records, employee number 8, and retrieve record, process. We probably get rid of this alert box now, and perfect. So there we go. Now let's scroll up here slowly and make sure everything is populating correctly. Okay, good. So now let's try a different one. We'll do 10. Process. You don't have to refresh it every single time because it'll run the code fresh. And as you can see, somebody needs to take some courses. And it looks good. And then we can just do one more here, a higher number, process. Okay, good. So now we've effectively created the retrieve function for our form. So now we have create and retrieve. So if we come down here and then press create, it clears that entire form, you remember. And we should be able to come over to our sheet here and scroll all the way down and see that it did in fact append that row 45. So now we actually can think about how it is that we want to update this. And maybe not the next video, because the next video I truly want to look at that this thing right here and try and condense it down. Because the more you type this out, the more chances you have of making a spelling error or whatnot. And I would like to think about doing it the way that we did our create, which is we just query select all and give everyone that we want, every field we want, this class, this rectd, grab all of those IDs and then essentially use a for each to assign the values based on, that index. So I think that's what we'll play with next time. But then after that, we can start actually working on, come back over to our sheet here, we can actually start working on how we're going to update it. And how we would update it would be essentially we want to retrieve the field, then retrieve the record like we're doing now, and then make an update on that record somehow, and then change it. So let's see, we end at 62. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our code here, or not our code, excuse me, our form, and I'm going to retrieve 45. Now, when we use index of to retrieve this record, it's only going to grab the first instance of that. So this is record 45, and let's change the last name to Finger. And then let's update that. Come over here, press update. Now, if we come over to our sheet here, you'll see that it did in fact update, but we still have all the other occurrences of 45 within our data. So if we were to come back here and try to retrieve 45, what's going to end up happening is the index of is going to run like it's supposed to, but it's only going to pull that very first instance. And then it's not going to pull anything else. So essentially what we're going to want to do is Let's delete these. We don't want to have to come in here and grab, after we create it, come in here and then grab this 45 and then move it over. We could, using the technique that we already did, because if you think about it, we're selecting the employee number and then returning that entire row. We could just simply, instead of returning that entire row, overwrite and replace all this with set values. But when we think about how HR functions and what it is that we need to do within HR, we don't get rid of records. We don't just simply delete the records and they just never exist anymore. We need that audit trail to defend our decisions or to see exactly what happened with an employee or whatever. We need to retain those records. So instead of deleting it or overwriting it, what I'm wanting to do is let's create another sheet here just to get it prepared, and we will rename this simply archive. So what we can do is, after it sends it over to the HTML side to populate, and then when we press create, we want to store all that information in a variable like we have. But before we append it, we want to grab this just like we are when we retrieve it. And instead of sending it to our HTML, we want to send it over to our archive. And then we can append that row. And then our older or our newer one, we simply append that row at the bottom. And then that way we maintain that record in our archive, but in our employee data, we have the current record. And then when we get ready to do that delete function, again, we're not deleting it, we're just going to archive it. We just take the second stage of that code and have it sent over to archive. Now there's nothing wrong with having an archive that has, 50 employee 45s. It just means that there was 50 different actions that produced that archive record. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope that was helpful. One thing to just remember when we're retrieving information from a Google Sheet, ensure that the formatting is correct. Ensure that each piece of information here in your employee data matches not only the type of the field it's going to, but also if it's a select box, ensure that what you're sending over there is a selectable item for that select box or it won't populate. And also just keep in mind the formatting. I want to hit on that again. The formatting is going to be crucial when you're retrieving information from a Google Sheet. Remember, we came in here and formatted everything here as plain text. And at the beginning of the next video, what's going to end up happening is every time, let's go ahead and I'm going to send 45 back. So I'm going to create a record and you'll see it pop up. It should be coming over here soon. Yep, there it is, 45. So now when we look at this, we know we set everything here to plain text. But when it comes over, it's not set to plain text. So the first thing we're going to do at the beginning of that next video is we are going to go through and write a line of code that after this appends, it's then going to set it all to plain text. Because if we try to retrieve this, it wouldn't work. So we want to be able to fix that. And then we'll look at this massive code here and see if we can do something different with it. So until next time, I hope to see you there. Please take care.